Ahoy there folks, it's time for another weekly developer Q&A, and I'm really hoping this one isn't too ranty or aggressive, and I'm hoping it doesn't go on too long because I have been seriously man down this week with some kind of flu or something, so I may need to edit this one to take out some of the long coughing breaks if I have a big coughing fit midway or things like that. I'll do my best to edit that and make it as pleasant as possible. Now again, a lot of people keep asking me, Benzie, why do you insist on doing the dev Q&A when you're not enjoying Eve Echoes right now? And the simple answer to that is twofold. On one hand, I really feel that I owe it to the community to still keep this up and showcase what could be coming to Eve Echoes, and on the other hand, because I still really love this game. I just don't like the direction it's going in right now and the decisions that the development team are making. But the dev Q&A gives me an opportunity to talk about the game and talk about the direction it's taking and hopefully offer up some solutions and other options. I've also seen recently that the developers have watched a couple of my videos, so fingers crossed they watch these at least and understand some of the ideas that could save this game. That's my hope, at least. Anyway, before I have a coughing fit and just die on microphone, let's jump straight in with question number 1. Are you planning on bringing back the CyberX core again for the faxes? You have multiple purple cores for the regular carriers, but not that. It'd be nice if they weren't behind a huge paywall. Okay, so you kind of contradicted yourself here, because if it's the CyberX, it's going to be behind a huge paywall. That is just how NetEase do things. Everything now is going to be paywall. Just watch and you will see. We're going to get things like the golden nanocores. Those will be behind massive amounts of payments. New implants will be behind payments. Any new cores that they add to the game, behind payments. There's a theme going here at this point. What was the last thing that NetEase added to Eve Echoes that wasn't ultimately locked behind payments? And if you say Dormant Realms, remember that to do the high-tier Dormant Realms, you need high-tier nanocores, which are behind payments. Anyway, Waternight, which is a new name on the dev Q&A scene, says, "We're trying to come up with new ways to bring the old nanocores back. It includes CyberX and more series of old cores. Stay tuned." Well, it shouldn't be that hard for them to bring the CyberX core back, considering they've basically already admitted that they're looking to copy and paste a load of the old events and just bring them back anyway, like they did with Verge of Silence, which was identical to the previous version, to the point that the rewards were functionally identical as well. So it's not a difficult thing to do, but equally, why would they bring back CyberX when they can just create a new nanocore and get payments from the people who missed CyberX and the people who bought during CyberX? If you bring back CyberX, you only get from people who didn't buy the first time, whereas if you go a second time with a new core, then you get payments from everyone. That's why they won't repeat some of these kind of things particularly regularly, and you're more likely to see them come out with a whole brand new nanocore that they're hoping everyone will buy. Question number 2, will we ever see any other weapon systems for player stations? Okay. I was interested to see where that one was going to go, but player stations, yeah, they're all missiles, and missiles are notoriously bad in Echoes, cool. With the issues related to missile damage delivery, yep, having a choice of station weapons would help alleviate some of those issues. New skills could be created around station weapons and defenses, making a player choose which areas to skill into. This, I actually agree with. So far, everything here, I think, yeah, genuinely good idea. This could and would tie in with implant technology as well as capital level weapons if desired. The implant technology, I'm not so sure, because you would need to be in the station yourself and using very specific implants at the time, at which point why not just be in a ship? But okay, I can kind of see where you're going with that. The capital level weapons, again, I kind of feel like that's probably a little bit of overkill. Look, as much as I hate on capitals, I don't hate capitals as a concept. I don't enjoy flying them personally, and I hate how NetEase have chosen to implement them. If we were to put capital weapons on stations, they're just going to blap everything, and capitals do serve a purpose. Like, the purpose of a dreadnought is to arrive on grid with a station and destroy that station. If the station can do the amount of DPS as a dreadnought back at it, that suddenly becomes a bit problematic in my head, but I'm sure there are some folks in the comment section who'll disagree with that, and that's fine. This is a knee-jerk reaction. This is me reacting to the developer Q&A, and there are probably things I haven't considered in regards to that. I just think the capital level weapons, probably a touch overkill on stations, personally. It would also force attacking players to make certain choices regarding loadouts as well. Just curious if we'll see any variety offered regarding player situations. Now, before I read Paulin's defense, I just want to point out that having just recently been looking into dropping stations in EVE Online, there are a lot of different options of things that you can drop there that we just don't have in Echoes and would be really cool to see. There are different modules that you can put onto stations, things like warp scramblers, warp disruptors, E-war modules. You can put like neutralizers or target painters, weapon disruptors, that kind of thing onto various structures, and those will affect and attack the people around them. That is something I would like to see in EVE Echoes, something eventually to expand into. I think there's far more pressing stuff to be added to Echoes before any of this, including the weapons. But that doesn't mean I inherently think this is a bad idea. I just think if it's going to be done, it needs to be done properly. It needs to be done after we've fixed the glaring issues. Like, again, look, if you're driving down the motorway in your car, or the highway, freeway, whatever you want to call it, in whatever country you're in, and your check engine light comes on, and you keep driving, right? When you finally reach your destination and you pull over in a garage, you go and get your engine checked. You don't have someone sit there and change your tires and put new hubcaps on and respray your car and, you know, reupholster the seats and all of that. You check the engine light first. Like, you fix whatever that problem is. And that's kind of the situation we have in EVE Echoes, that there's a lot of glaring issues that really need to be addressed. And until those are addressed, I really think the brakes need to be pulled on everything else. Doesn't mean we can't talk about the ideas, but if a developer is listening to this going, oh, Benzie actually agrees with this one, maybe we should do that. Yes, I agree with that on the condition that the other more glaring issues have been solved first. Exploration, nihilist spaces, proper meaningful PvE, small ship content, this kind of thing. But I do think that adding weapons and systems to stations could be interesting. I think there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with that, and I would love to see that eventually be a thing. What does Paulin say? The weapon diversity of the player station is one of the most discussed topics in our design team. That's troubling. Like, when you're sitting there with a game that is almost literally on fire and people hemorrhaging out daily, that the most discussed topic isn't, oh crap, why are all these people leaving? How can we save them? Or if that is the topic and your response is, oh, we should totally fix stations, then I question, like, how that works. What I think is meant here is the weapon diversity of the player station is one of the most discussed topics in our design team when asked the question, how can we monetize the game further? Fair enough. We have some ideas about the modules and skills of the player station, but there's no development plan in the short term. The new content in the near future will still focus on ships. And that's kind of heartening to say. Now, I did have a conversation with Cloud recently. I moved this publicly into the CC chat of the official Discord for the other content creators to see as well. Obviously, not a lot of it we can talk about because of NDAs and stuff like that, but what I can basically say is that Cloud has mentioned that the past few years were the idea of getting as much content onto the game as possible. This year is a case of going back and addressing some of the issues and adding new ships. Now, when they say adding new ships, I've asked for clarity on this because I would love to see Rifter Assault, Tristan Assault, Kestrel Assault, Tormentor Assault. I think those are ships we need. I think we need more lower tier ships as well that can be flown at different, for different content, but we absolutely need the content to support that as well. I think that there need to be some changes to exploration ships, and I would love to see some of the other types of ships from EVE Online brought into Echoes as well that we just don't have. I think there are some really cool options that could be added. My concern is we will still focus on ships just means, oh yeah, we're working really hard to make sure that Titans and possibly supercarriers are added to EVE Echoes by the August anniversary, which we know is happening, at least the Titan aspect of it. So I'm hoping that we'll still focus on ships, isn't just adding Titans, and it is actually adding meaningful ships and content for them. That would be awesome. Like, genuinely, I don't mean to go on about EVE Online, but it is the game I'm really enjoying at the moment. It's nice to be playing EVE and thoroughly enjoying it again. They've just added a big new patch that added a whole ton of new faction warfare-based content, where they turned around and said, well, there's all of this new stuff for salvagers. If you're into the salvaging, then this is something you can do. There's new exploration and hacking, there's new PvE, there's new PvP, there's all of these new systems. And the first thing that came to my head, and certainly to Nina's as well, we were talking about it at the time, was, oh my goodness, we're sitting here looking at actual new content. You know, they're adding new stuff for players to do, not payers, players. And some of that is capped, like the exploration stuff, for example. You can't do it in a tier 2 covert ops frigate. It has to be done in the standard Tech 1 Probe, Heron, Magnate, or Imicus, or their Navy fleet issue versions. Those are the only ones that can enter it. So the developers have literally said, we're adding this new content, but we're making sure that it's something that is designed for this group of players, not just everyone. Because yeah, we know that a load of you can fly these massive souped up Tech 2 ships, but we're going to limit this so that it is specifically designed for these people. And it's like, wait, what? Still doing that? Like, that's incredible. That is a really good thing. And I'm hoping Echoes will learn from that and look at it and go, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of people crying out for very specific content. Maybe we should add some specific content. Final point I'll make on this before we move on is, again, I did say to Cloud on this as well, that yes, I get that you want new content for all players, but you cannot have content for all players. With the way that Echoes is designed and balanced, the second that you open it up to everyone, what you are actually doing is prioritizing certain ships. If you make it so that it is possible to clear in carriers and dreadnoughts, for example, there's no reason to use anything less, because the carriers and dreadnoughts have more tank, more DPS, more possibilities to them than even the battleships do. Like, if you can clear it in your carrier, why would you bring your battleship? When talking to some people recently about EVE Online, for example, talking about Abyssal Dead Spaces, I fly a Tengu, which is a tier 3 cruiser, and I love that thing. It's brilliant for ratting in wormholes, but it can't enter Abyssal Dead Spaces, and there's a part of me that's sad that I can't use one of my favourite ships in Abyssal Dead Spaces, but equally, I get it, because it would just dominate and obliterate there. So the idea is that you have to use other ships instead, and it gives you actually more reason to have multiple ships and undock them and have fun with them. Anyway, let's move on then to question number 3, because I could go on about that one for a long time, and I can already feel my voice and throat beginning to give way. Question number 3 then. Please consider adding some various ways to help people produce classified 2-3 gravitational wave graph. It's a fun content, but now price is too high for players to enjoy and profit from it. Yeah, agreed that the gravitational wave graphs are basically the only thing in exploration that is actually, I would argue, fun right now. Like, we can talk about the profitability of exploration. Believe me, I've gone into that one many times. And ultimately, I don't want to change the profitability. I want to change the fun of it. When I say that, you know, it's really hit and miss how much ISK you can make with exploration, I'm not asking for them to buff exploration, because that has a whole load of additional knock-on effects that could be very dangerous for the game. What I'm saying is, rather than give us the opportunity for, you know, X amount of loot in one site, and you maybe find one site an hour, literally reduce the amount of loot in each site by 5 times, but make it so that we can find 5 times more sites per hour. That's more fun, that's more engaging content. People get bored flying around and finding nothing. It would be fun if they found more stuff, but that stuff individually was worth less ISK. And kind of, when it comes to the gravitational wave graphs, the point is, it's actual gameplay. There's stuff going on here. There's a puzzle to solve. There's stuff that you actually do with this, and it gets you moving around. I would argue that the gravitational wave graphs also need to be made more explorer-specific and less focus on, hey, I found this thing, let's bring a whole fleet 45 jumps across the entirety of New Eden to go and complete it, because that also just doesn't really happen. You have to get lucky and find a gravitational wave graph that finds a combat anomaly in a system fairly close to where you live, and then you need the players to go and do it. I think that needs a redesign. I think exploration needs a lot more than just new ways to get gravitational wave graphs, but I do think that this is a good idea. This is a step in the exploration restoration program, as I'm going to start calling it at this rate. I think, yeah, having a new way to get gravitational wave graphs and make them cheaper for explorers as a form of fun gameplay, absolutely agreed. I just think it's part of a bigger plan. Water Knight responds, we've also noticed this issue and put gravitational wave graph in the event store, which will be updated soon. We'll release them in more gameplays in the future. Thank you for your support. What would be cool? What would genuinely be cool is if you kind of, again, this is very off the cuff. There are probably some flaws with this that people in the comments will point out, and I'll respond to each and every one as I usually try to. What would be cool, in my opinion, is that if gravitational wave graphs could drop from rats, there was an opportunity just for them to drop from rats, and that the graphs that they drop are related to those rats. So if you're in angel space and they drop one, then it's going to be somewhere in angel space. That, to me, would be a really interesting way of doing it, especially with the ones that require fleets, because it doesn't necessarily mean that, if it drops in Scalding Pass, it's going to be 4 jumps across that you actually get the thing. No, it could be all the way over in Cache or wherever, Esoteria. Just as long as it's somewhere that is angel space, you can still get a fleet and go there, and that may be still enemy territory. That would be cool. I also think that gravitational wave graphs should have a chance of dropping in exploration sites. It's exploration themed, and it just makes sense that whilst you're hunting for treasure, you find a map to more treasure. That is all it needs. In my opinion, that is all the gravitational wave graphs need to be put into exploration and possibly put into ratting as well as a secondary income. Putting them into an event store is just making you pay for them in a different way. Like, they are already expensive. You're not gonna make it suddenly drop in price by making people pay Aurum for it or Concord points or whatever. It needs to be in the game, not in the sides, in the game. Like, in the actual gameplay, not in the shop. I know the shop's in the game, but I mean in the gameplay. It needs to be something you can actually get whilst playing, not something that you get because you've been playing, if that makes sense. Anyway, yeah, I would like to see more gravitational wave graphs, but I think exploration needs a lot more than just that. Give us the hacking minigame, redo the respawns so that they respawn a lot faster, but with a wider spread, so that there's actually content available at all times. Make that content, more frequent, but less lucrative to balance it. Now, those are my opinions. I've done an entire video on how to fix exploration, by the way. I just think that, the gravitational wave graph idea is something I didn't cover, and I think those should be dropped by rats and be relevant to those rats. And I think that when you're hacking into sites, you should get gravitational wave graphs. Those ones affect the entire universe. Like, I can find a Gurustus data site, hack into it, and get a gravitational wave graph that sends me all the way down to Delve. Anyway, let's move on then to question number 4. My voice is just holding out, but we'll see. The chat translate feature is very helpful, but it would be good if it was automatic, so it automatically translates so we can just read it. This would remove the need to... This would remove the need to open chat and click on every single message to read it. The need to click to translate is very difficult to manage during combat, and at critical moments can mean the difference of someone losing a ship or help arriving in time. Or you could learn Spanish or Russian or whatever. Having people who can speak this is, ideally kind of a good thing, but I'm kind of being facetious there. I kind of agree with this, but I majorly disagree with it. We'll see what Waterknight says first. This is a great idea. We've been working on optimizing the experience in battle. This feature will improve the smoothness of battle. At the same time, it can also better connect pilots in different regions. We'll discuss with the developers the feasible solutions for this. It's not going to happen. I tell you now, it's not going to happen. Now, without being facetious, if you want to be improving the smoothness of battle, it's not through text. No major alliance is turning up to call to arms and giving all of their orders in typed text. They're doing it over voice chat. And if they're doing it over voice chat, then you probably are going to have someone who is giving orders in English, who is receiving the orders in English, and then reiterating those orders in Spanish. And that does actually add some really cool gameplay. It means that if you have an alliance of players who, come from multiple communities, which is really cool, that you value someone who speaks both languages and allows you to bridge that gap. The auto-translate, I think the auto-translate feature in chat is freaking fantastic. I'm kind of disappointed it took them as long as it did to get it into the game, but it is an awesome option. It still annoys me that it's locked behind Omega, but hey, everything is, and at least it's only locked behind Omega, not an additional monthly subscription of $500 US, which is what the rest of the game's beginning to feel like. But I do think that the auto-translate is a really good thing. The concept of auto-translate, though, is difficult. And this kind of ties in with last week's Dev Q&A, week before, where we were talking about the whole thing of when someone puts a system in chat, can you just, notify everyone how many jumps that is away from them so I don't have to tap? And the argument there was that, if I'm autopiloting, I have to tap and change my autopilot. It's like, yes, you have to make a choice of what you're doing more important than responding to that. That is a meaningful decision, and I do genuinely think that this game needs more decisions like that, not fewer. The other thing I said was that ultimately that's going to add major server load, and I had a whole ton of people turn around and say to me, no, it wouldn't necessarily, and then give examples that categorically prove that it would increase server load. Like people saying, hey, but when you open, like the game already knows where you are in relation to everything. When you open up the market, it shows everything and how many jumps away it is. Yes, but how long does it take to open up the market? Same when you go to your personal, like, my brain's gone. Flu brain is getting me here. When you go to your personal assets, how long does that take to open? Because it's asking the game where all your stuff is and how many jumps away each of those stations are. That's exactly my point. Now imagine that every time someone sends a message in chat saying, oh, I'm in this system, you're going to get that same data load pushed out to everyone. And that's also just on a one-time use. You're going to get people who think that this is great fun, and they will just start linking 20 different systems, and that's 20 different server requests. And if you've got 1,000 people in your alliance chat, which, okay, admittedly, that's fairly, unlikely at this point. If you've got 500 people in your alliance chat, and you put 5 requests out, that's 2,500 instances being, of server requests going out at a split second. It's not an easy thing. And when it comes to the automatic translation, that's actually compounded and made worse because it uses Google Translate, right? That is how the EVE ecosystem works. It's how Infinite Lagrange works. It's how many other different games do this. Basically, it sends a request off to Google Translate and then it comes back, which is why you can't do too many of them in quick succession. But essentially now imagine that I say something I've got 500 people in my alliance. And just for a moment, assume that they all have their primary language set to English. We then have one other person in our alliance who speaks in German. And he types a message in German, and the second he hits send on that message goes off out to all 500 of us. It has to go off to Google Translate, because it can't just translate the message once and then paste it to 500 people. It's got to translate individually, because it's got to check what your language is. Like, if there's 500 people, right? It's 500 different requests every time a message gets sent. And when someone sends a message back, then it's going to auto-translate for him, but everyone else's chat needs to suddenly check, is the language that person just typed in the language that my user speaks? If not, I need to request what language that is and translate it. If you've got 500 people speaking 500 different languages, then that's 500 translation requests instantly. Even if you've only got 500 people and 400 of them speak one language and 100 speak a second language, the system doesn't intrinsically know that. It can't just memorize that. It needs to request that information every time. And if you go, well, why not? Because computers don't technically memorize anything. They just write it down somewhere, and then when that information needs checking, they just literally flip open their notebook and check the page. Literally what Albert Einstein argued, the point was that it was, why would I memorize all of these different formulae in physics and that when I can just write them down and read them, right? That's what a computer does. And if you sit there and say, oh, but computers memorize this stuff all the time. No, they don't. They just write it down somewhere. And when you ask the computer what that information is, it just instantly checks where it wrote it down. And you can theoretically go in and change. I'm not going to get into computer science here, for crying out loud. It's blatantly obvious that a lot of the people who argue with me on this kind of stuff have never worked in games development or done anything more than basic HTML as far as computer programming goes. Genuinely, I don't mean that to sound rude, but a lot of times that people got very aggressive with me, and those are the people I tend to call out the most, by the way. If you've replied politely to me and I've politely replied back, I'm not talking about you right now. I'm talking about the people like, no, Benzie, you're wrong. You're an idiot. You clearly don't know what you're talking about. And then proceed to give me some kind of bullshit argument that proves that they clearly don't know what they're talking about. This system, the bottom line of this is that if you implemented this system, it's essentially going to have to send a request. When a message is sent, the server needs to request from every single player in that chat what their basic language is, check it against the message that has just been sent, translate it into the relevant language, then post it to them. That's why it's done on a request by request basis, because that way only the people who actually want that information, because again, now imagine that only 100 of the people in that chat are even paying attention. The other 400 are just sitting AFK with their phone down somewhere. They haven't logged out properly or whatever. The game still needs to translate for everyone. Whereas if it's on a user request basis, it's only the people who actually want to see that information who send the request, which ends up with a much lighter server load. Anyway, I'm sure I'm going to get some arguments on that one in the description. I may have got some of the stuff there wrong. I'm not going to say I'm a genius and I know absolutely everything, but again, if you feel like you've given me polite answers and, you know, challenged me politely, I'm fine with that. I love having conversations and learning new stuff like that. I can admit when I'm wrong. What I don't like is people who go, no, lol, you're wrong, you know nothing. Clearly you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, well, okay, educate me. And then they come out with something that is even more wrong than I could possibly ever hope to be if I'd tried. So I think when it comes down to it, there's some interesting stuff in this week's Dev Q&A. CyberX cores, yeah, we'll see them back when they decide that they're going to, but we're more likely to get brand new cores because brand new cores ultimately result in more payments. Weapon systems, I would love to see alongside electronic warfare and stuff like that on outposts. I just think that that's very niche and should happen at some point in the future. I'd actually arguably like to see skins before that, because skins are a cosmetic payment. And I think that that's kind of easier to implement. I don't know, it's controversial. It's controversial, but again, all of the station stuff comes long after everything else. Gravitational wave graphs, exploration needs some big fixes. This would be a cool one. Tie it into actual gameplay, not a freaking event store. I love how that's NetEase's answer for everything. Hey, you want more of this stuff? We're going to put it somewhere you can buy it. Come on. Come on. Put shit in the fucking game, you know? And then the global chat feature. Yeah, really cool feature, but it's not a good idea. Like, we're already talking about server issues. Now imagine you've got 1,000 people in the system with you, and you've got all this black screening stuff going on, and then someone starts spamming local in whatever language no one else speaks. Suddenly they crash everyone out because there's so many server requests going on. Yeah. Anyway, folks, I am gonna crawl back into bed and die for the rest of the day. I'm sure I'll be online for a little bit later. I have been playing Echoes quite a bit recently. Still proceeding with my little exploration thing that I'm doing. I look forward to sharing that with you all at some point in the future. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this week's Dev Q&A in the description down below. If you've made it this far in the video, I think you owe me a like for all my hard work whilst I'm feeling as crap as I do. Subscribe if you haven't already, and if you want to support the channel, you know to find me on Patreon, PayPal, and indeed our Redbubble merchandise store. Otherwise, folks, thank you for all your support, thank you for watching, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.